Hello. Still morning where I am on the west coast of Northern California. But if you're joining, if you're joining live or you're joining for the replay, I welcome you wherever you are in space and time. Whether that happens to align with morning time or afternoon or evening, or maybe you're coming from the future because you're watching tomorrow. Where I am right now, it's Friday. What are we? November 4th, 2022. Pretty wild to be able to say that. So it's been a while. It's been a while since I went live publicly. I tend to go live a fair bit within places like the Collective or Fierce Grace or other programs I run, but it's been a while. So welcome. It's been coming up in conversations a lot. And so it's been this piece that I've been percolating on, which I don't think if I say this, that it would be news to anyone, right? This idea that the longest or the most enduring or the most long-term relationship that we'll ever have is with ourselves. Most people would say like, oh yeah, or we've heard that before, or we know that, or it's a little bit like many well-known ideas or sayings, that it's almost by them becoming so more commonplace, right? This idea like the longest relationship you'll have with yourself is it's become commonplace enough. I think it's probably cyclical, but out of the more cultural conversation, and it's become more mainstream, and that can almost dilute it sometimes, that it becomes this like, oh yeah, I know that, like, okay, on to what's next, like what's new, what's something I haven't heard before. So even when this idea came up for me, I was like, well, I can't talk about that, like everybody knows that, everybody already knows that. But then like so many things, what really came up for me was this idea of like, yeah, but are we living like maybe we know it cognitively, but are we actually living like that? And what would that mean? What does it mean to really live like that? To keep it? It may not be this idea that we have to stay present to it at all moments, but what is it to continue to remember this? To be willing to come back to this truth, and to keep returning to what it actually means that I will be in relationship with myself my entire life. Like we talk about, I want a lifetime partner, I want a life partner who's, and then we're like, oh, I have one. Doesn't mean I can't have another, right? This is not an either or proposition, like either, be your own life partner or have another life partner. It's both. It's always both. And some would probably argue with this, but I don't think we can change the past. So whatever that relationship has been, and here I still am, me and me. And to even recognize, you, wherever you are in space and time, however old you are, however long this relationship has been going on for. And again, depending on your beliefs or what might happen to actually be true about lifetimes and karma, I don't know. But that's sort of how long has this relationship been going on for. But let's just talk about this life. For me, here we are. I'm 44. I'll be 45 in February. And so that's a long relationship. I mean, when we hear about couples, for instance, and where they're celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, and we're like, wow. But here it's been me and me for almost 45 years, and I'm still here. And I think there's so much that that would be so useful in a way to bridge from how we think about long-term relationships, and maybe even especially romantic relationships, life partnerships, that we could bridge back into this way of relating with ourselves. Could I celebrate that I've been in relationship with myself for almost 45 years? we talk a lot about, or there is a lot of talk about, let's say, the idea that we change and evolve. And can we change and evolve together? Or can we allow our partner to change and evolve? And that I would say that again, that bridges back to ourselves. Like, can I allow myself to change and evolve? Can I allow myself to be who I am now and not, who I was 20 years ago, or who I think I should be? Or and again, the same plays out in our romantic relationships. This way we go like, oh, can I, if we're actually going to be in relationship for 10, 12, 20, 50 years, and with ourselves, it's not an if, right? There is no, this is not a this is not a hypothetical question. I will be with me until the day I die, possibly beyond. But when we think about long-term relationship, when we think about life partners, we think like, gosh, oh, I hope we get to be together for the next 10 years. And then we think like, well, how are we going to change and evolve? And how do we, first, can I allow that other person to change and evolve and keep getting to know them and love them as they change and evolve, and be loved by them as I change and evolve? But can I just keep being curious? Can I keep being curious about how are their life circumstances changing them? And then again, if I kind of pull the thread, if you would, and bridge it back into this, like, what does it actually mean to be curious with my own self about who I am now? And what does it, that rather than these are the ways that I would like to grow and change and evolve. This is, yes, I want to keep growing. And what that means, we usually don't say this out loud, but most people, when they say like, I want to keep working on myself and I want to keep growing and my personal development's really important, we have an idea about what that means. I will be less attached to these things, and I will be better at these things, and I will be less grumpy in these ways. And like, we have a list of things. And of course, we have that with our friendships and our family and our romantic partners too, right? The list of the ways that we hope they will grow and evolve. But there's also the sense like we know that that we don't have control over that, and that even they don't have total control, right? They're living life and they're changing. And so again, to bridge it back and like, okay, so there's the checklist of how I would like to grow and change. And then there's really the curiosity of like, and how is life happening? What is life offering? And what is then my response as a being, as a body, as an animal, as a human, as a spirit, as a soul? How am I actually growing and changing and evolving? How have my opinions changed? Have my kids like to say, I'll feed them a food that then they'll be like, I don't like this. And I'll be like, you used to like it. And they'll say, my taste buds changed. Right? Have my taste buds changed? Are there things I used to like that I don't? Things I used to not like that I do? And that could be related to food. It could be related to how we like to spend our time, how we like to be touched, what we like sexually. We have these ideas about like, am I an introvert or am I an extrovert, versus sort of first of all, a spectrum, but second of all, like, oh, I used to really like to spend my time at all night dance parties, and now I really like to spend my time going to bed early with a book. Maybe that matters in the realm of these sort of psychological personality-based systems, and maybe it's just useful to recognize what nourishes me, who I am, how I like to. Even I've noticed like the books I like to read have actually changed. I still love to read. So that has not changed from the time I was, well, since I can remember, I've loved to be read too. But since I was 4 years old, I've loved to read. I still love to read, but the books I like to read has changed. So curiosity about our own selves. And to me, I mean, this is kind of like on the content level. And if we dive back down deeper, really, there's something so sacred and profound about really just acknowledging like, oh, I will be with me until the day I die. And I will be with me through every love relationship that I have between now and then. And I will be with me through every friendship I have between now and then. And I will be with me on every experience I have between now and then. How do I actually want to? I mean, I would actually say, I'm going to zoom out. I was about to say, how do I want to nurture and be in that relationship? I would actually step back and I would say, sometimes it's really valuable to say, how am I treating that relationship? And not just how am I treating myself? Because there is this thing that's like, I mean, first of all, a lot of self care practices come more from an idea we have about ourselves and about what self care is. And we tend to be like telling ourselves how we should be nourished and what we should like and what should feel good. I should like to go to the spa and get my nails done. But what I actually like is, to lie on the ground with a book and have nobody talk to me for, a full day or, um, but also there's a way that, I mean, of course, me and me is actually only me. But there's another way that the idea of self-care and this idea of what do I want, or bringing it to this singular human, ignores or negates that there is a relationship here. And so it's not even only about what do I want and how do I take care of me, but is like, oh, how do I actually nurture this relationship? And again, if we step back before, how do I want to nurture this relationship? And we say, how am I? How am I treating this relationship? Or how am I participating in this relationship? In one sense, we could say we are. We have always participated in a relationship with ourselves, and we will. How consciously we're doing that, or how are we doing it, that's up for conversation and debate, if you will. But we are in this relationship, and so how are we? So first, just sort of describing with some honesty. And one of the things that I definitely catch myself doing and that I experience in other people is we take ourselves for granted. And we do this in long-term relationship as well. Like, it could be romantic. I mean, we see this obviously in kind of like the crumbling of long-term romantic partnerships. But we certainly see it in families, or like with our kids, this sort of sense like, oh, they'll just always be there. Like they're a given. And we do that with ourselves. Oh, I'll just always be there. And in one way, of course, that is true. I will always be here. And in another way, that we treat this relationship like that has an impact. And we know if we treat other people like we take them for granted, or we're sort of like, oh, I put my attention on other things because they'll always be there. Oh, work is more important now. I just see them at home. They're always at home. So whenever I don't have to actually do anything special because they're just there. And of course, we rarely, if ever, say these things out loud, but we do treat other people this way, sort of like, oh, well, it's fine. They'll be there. I'll deal with that later. I'll nurture that relationship later. Once I've gotten this project done at work, or once I've made this money, or once I've done this thing that I need to do, or once I've handled my self-care, or who knows what it is, right? We sort of put things off, and this relationship with ourselves too, the sense of like, oh, well, I'll be there. Like I can get to that later, or it'll always be there when I need it. And it will, but it has an impact, right? If we take ourselves for granted, if we don't sort of go like, oh, hey friend, how are you doing today? How's your body feel? How does your heart feel? How does your spirit feel? What are you interested in? What is delighting you? What's something beautiful that you saw in the last 24 hours? I mean, again, we can bridge these back into these are wonderful questions to ask our friends, our family, our lovers, our long-term partners, if we want to know them. And the same is true for ourselves. Oh, do I want to know myself? And sort of different than your typical personal growth, self-help, like get to know myself so I can like it's like a thing, rather than, again, an evolving curiosity. Hey, how are you today? How did you sleep last night? Did you have any dreams? And And we think almost this sense of like the opposite of taking oneself for granted is almost like urgency, like I gotta do it now. And those aren't really the opposite, right? It's it's treating something like it matters, and that it's worth giving attention to in this moment. And I would say that our relationship with ourselves truly is that. And it's not so much the cliche of like, you have to love yourself first, it's more, I am the person who I will be with all of the time, like all the time. And so, wouldn't I like to know and like and love the person that I'm literally with all the time? And how would I like to be treated by the person that I'm with all the time? And the cool thing about our relationship with ourselves is like we get to play both parts. Um, so this is not to negate in any way. Again, I said this at the beginning, but I want to say it again here, which is this is not an either or proposition. So often, I mean, I really find this with humans in general, but I work with a lot of women. And certainly, when I work in the realm of the no man diet and this space of actually setting aside a significant portion of other relationships and bringing a lot of focus to what is here between me and me, that there's often this thing of like, well, then do I have to just settle for being with myself for the rest of my life? And there's two things I would say for that. The first is what I wanted to say is like, it's not an either or proposition. It isn't like I get to be in relationship with myself or I get a life partner, I get to be a great lover to myself or I get a great love, external lover. I get to be a wonderful friend to myself or I can have wonderful friendships. Like this is a truly yes and situation. And my experience is the deeper my relationship has gotten with myself, truly, right? Not in this abstract, like, oh, my relationship with myself. It's like the more I always stumble over this. Is it dived in? The more I've dived in, the more I've dove in, the more I've dove in, the deeper I've dived in, the more intimate I have really become with this being that is here with me for always. The richer all these other relationships have become, the richer my relationship with the earth, with the more than human realm, in my friendships, in my intimate relationship, in my partnership, in my relationship with my children. It's like that silly cartoon, where they're going from black and white, or maybe they're going from Technicolor into black and white. I don't know, but you see there's a delineating line and there's like Technicolor ends here. Well, the relationship with ourselves is the Technicolor, and it doesn't negate in any way any other realm of relationship. It's like a magnifying, color enhancing Instagram filter for every other experience and every other relationship that we ever have in our life. And that is, there's very few guarantees I'll make in life, but that is a guarantee. That is a mountain I am willing to die on. So I started this because I want to say this is not either or. I don't want to negate in any way that human beings are pack animals. We have a genuine, legitimate human animal need for connection, for touch, for other human beings, and for other beings. And in our current culture, and the way that so many systems are set up in this culture, that side of the other tends to get a lot of attention and a lot of our resources, our time, our attention, our thinking, our planning, our strategizing, the way we spend our time, like all these kind of resources, a lot goes over there. And there is this tendency to sort of be like, oh, I'll get to myself when, well, when I have that relationship that I want, like, then I'll be able to focus on myself. Or we sort of go like, I'll focus on myself so that I can get that relationship. And in that way, it's a little like going like, oh, I think I'll be friends with this woman so she can introduce me to that man. It feels a little like shit. Like if you've ever been that friend that someone's, just cozying up to so you can introduce them to someone they're interested in sexually or professionally, you're kind of like, I don't really like this relationship. That's how it feels between us and us. If we're like, let me do all this, like, personal growth work so that I can have this other thing that's better than me. And honestly, I mean, when I think about how common and prevalent this is, it makes me want to cry. This thing of like, it comes up a lot in the no man diet on all levels, but especially sexually. This idea of like, okay, well, I'm fine and I've gotten good at pleasuring myself, but it's not really the thing I want. And I'm like, why not? Why not? Because if I'm going to be my lover for the rest of my life, and again, that doesn't negate having other lovers or a life partnership, but there is nothing guaranteed in that. There's nothing guaranteed. I have known people, who the love of their life died. Do I, knock on wood? I don't wish this for me. I don't wish this on anyone. But there is no guarantee. But what is guaranteed is that actually I am my friend and I am my lover for the rest of my life. And I would hope that I have some of the best experiences with me. And that actually has been my experience. And I also have a fantastic lover. So it's not like I'm my best lover because like what's over here is chopped liver, but there's often this sense like, oh, I'm kind of chopped liver and it'll do like in a pinch. It'll do when I don't have anyone else. It'll do when I don't have the real deal. It's like, like an energy bar, when you can't really have a meal. It'll do. I don't wish for anybody that your own friendship, love relationship, and sexual relationship be with yourself be sort of like, well, it'll do in a pinch. And so, my invitation, and certainly as an invitation to women who might be in a space who want to step into the no man diet, this is a whole piece of that program. And I absolutely invite you in, especially while we're in early bird pricing and bonuses. But my invitation, regardless of your gender, your sexual orientation, any of those pieces, regardless of, even if you're in, especially honestly, if you're in a wonderful long-term relationship that you plan on staying in, is that you become your own best lover. And I can guarantee that it will actually only magnify and enhance the relationship you have with your lover, with your friends, with every other area of your life. I'll leave it at that. I always love to hear how any of this lands. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you disagree with me, I mean, that's always interesting too. How this might be living in your life, any curiosities you have about how to implement this in your life. I love the ongoing dialogue, and I wish for each of you the most deeply nourishing relationships with your own self for the rest of your life. Ciao.